Hey crafters, thanks for being here today. Welcome to another sewing adventure, and I'm very excited about this project because I have been envisioning this project and trying to figure out how to make it work and saving supplies for this project for a very long time. And I feel like the moment is right. The weather, my mood, the supplies I've saved, everything is coming together. This is the moment to make this sewing project happen. However, while doing this, I also have to admit that I may have a problem. Yeah, I may have a gingham addiction. You might have recognized this dress. I made this earlier in the spring. Super fun, like purpley, 70s inspired dress. Very comfy, by the way. Love this one, especially with like the cutesy retro details. Fun project. I will link to that. I also made a 1950s style dress out of gingham. Oh, okay. I love this brown and white check. It's so cute, but like, it's not just cutesy. You know, it's got like a little edge of like, I feel like it's kind of modern. You know, it's squares. You don't need a lot of embellishment because the fabric speaks for itself. I love this. Okay, super comfy, super comfy. These are two projects that have all happened recently. Then there's more. Hang on. Yeah. Guess who's been collecting gingham for a long time? Oh, and there's more too. It's just in another box. I also have a craft store near me where they sell like donated items, so it's like a thrift store, craft store. Oh, anytime I find gingham there, as you can tell, I snatch it up. I don't know. I think I have a problem. But there is a reason to some of this fabric gingham collecting here. Gingham makes me happy. Like, it's just such a fun print, right? Who doesn't want to feel like they're going on a picnic? Especially this time of year, right? But then combine that with the colors. Oh my gosh, I mean, like, this is happy stuff, right? So then that got me thinking, what if I could collect enough colors of gingham so that I could make a dress using all of my favorite colors? And all of my favorite colors are basically the rainbow or the color spectrum, you know? I want to try making a dress that uses red, orange, yellow, green, blue, maybe not indigo, but definitely violet, and try to pack in as many colors in one dress as I can. I think I've finally saved enough gingham colors, and you know, the weather is so nice and warm, and kind of have this feeling of optimism going on in the world that it just seems like the right time. Don't think I'm alone on this like crazy color, comfy, flowy dress thing, because I'm seeing lots of like peasant-y dresses, lots of just like full billowing dresses, caftans even, crazy bright colors. I feel like, you know, this is the right moment to make my vision happen. Hopefully I will enjoy it, have fun wearing it, and maybe you guys will enjoy it too. Let me show you the pattern. Let me iron a whole bunch of fabric. And let's get started. Well, you guys, here is our pattern. You probably recognize this one from, gosh, a bunch of projects. I use it a lot because it is pretty basic, pretty straightforward, and I love playing around with different ways to modify this one. I think I first used it in my cottagecore dress or nightgown and I did a super basic version of this pattern there. So hey, if you want to try this pattern for the first time, I will link to that video and you could check it out. I also used it for my spring prairie dress video, so that one was really fun as well. Check them out if you want to try out this pattern and find some other ways you could use it. Today, I am going to keep things relatively close to the pattern. Surprise, surprise. Don't worry, I'm going to change things too. But we are starting with dress B, which is showing us that tiered skirt. So in this picture, there are 1, 2, 3 tiers to the skirt to make it that long maxi length. And then we still have kind of the peasant top with an elastic neck and elastic around the sleeves and a pullover style dress. So there's no zipper or buttons or anything. Okay, there's our pattern picture. Let's check out a little bit more of what we're looking at here. I'm checking out this one, of course. Now, here's how I got to modify this. The skirt has 3 tiers as is, but I need 4 tiers because I've kind of figured this out. I'm going to divide up the dress into color spectrum order. I'm going to, well, starting with violet or purple, the sleeves are going to be purple. The top is going to be red. And then I need to go from red to orange, yellow, green, and then to blue. So red, orange, yellow, green, add one more tier, blue. So then we'll have all the colors of basically the rainbow. I know I'm skipping indigo. I'm sorry, indigo, but we'll go purple or violet, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and we'll at least get as many as we can. Okay, so I need to make that other tier. I'm going to change things up a little bit. How long now should I make my tiers? How wide should I make them? Well, figuring out the length actually seemed to be pretty easy. You can tell in the picture, like they start... Sorry, I'm going to move this a little bit so you can see a little better. Let's zoom in a little bit. Whoa, sorry guys. Okay, so the tiers, you can tell in the picture, they start a little narrower and then get wider and wider towards the bottom. That looks really cool, and I've done that before, but to keep things super basic, I'm just going to make all the tiers even. I measured basically the width of each tier and added them together. It came to about 42 inches for the skirt length, and so I thought, why not just make each tier, since I want 4, why not make each tier 10 inches and just add my extra tier down here. They'll all be even, and I'm only losing about 2 inches in length, which actually is perfect. So each tier 10 inches wide. Got that figured out. But then how long do I make the bottom ruffle? Okay, so sorry, math and me, and yeah, anyway, here's what I'm looking at. The first ruffle, or the first tier of the fabric, the pattern piece is 16 inches long, but you cut it on the fold. So it's technically 16 plus 16 equals 32. And then, of course, you cut 2 of those. Okay, so that is going to be our top ruffle. My next pattern piece is, after measuring it, it's basically 21.5 cut on the fold. So 21.5 plus 21.5. And then you cut 2 of those. Okay, cool. But then the third ruffle is where things get a little crazy, because at first it looks like it's the same length as this one. Well, it is, but you cut 3 of them. So then it was like, okay, well, what about this bottom ruffle? What should I do? And I was kind of trying to figure out, ratios between the ruffles and, okay, well, this one is this size times 2, and this one is this one times 3. What should I do for this bottom ruffle? I know the cool math brain people out there probably have an excellent solution to this, but for me, I think I'm basically just going to do the same as the second and third ruffle, but then multiply it times 4. I don't know. I want to experiment with this length. I'll gather it and see if it looks just too full and too ruffly, and if so, I'll shrink it down. If it's too short, I could also add a little bit more to it. That's where I'm at with my bottom ruffle. If you guys come up with a cool solution to how to work that out, maybe let me know in the comments, because that would be cool. But yeah, that's where we're at. That's where we're going with this. I think it's going to be really good. Let's dive in, look at our pattern directions, and see where we're going next. Okay, well, let's look at what we got to do first. Well, of course, we got to cut out all the pieces. Yeah, that's going to take a really long time because I am working with remnants and using different colors for everything. So just gonna go slow. Take my time with that. Be zen. It'll be okay. And then, man, constructing this dress is pretty basic, which is one reason I love it. So since we're doing dress B, this is basically the bodice of the dress, front and back. And yeah, we got to sew up those side seams. And then since the dress is basically raglan sleeves, the sleeves, once we sew them on, are going to help form the shoulders. So just sewing that up, get your sleeve together. They're going to be talking you through, you know, making a little tube at the cuff of the sleeve so you can get it elastic in there. That's cool. And then, yeah, we sew the sleeves to the bodice of the dress, and yeah, there's our top. You can tell it looks like a really big wide neckline, and it is, but we're going to put elastic into that as well and gathering it to form, let's see, hang on, yeah, to form that neckline. So the shoulders are created by the sleeves, and then that neckline, that stretchy elastic, it cinches that neckline in to hold everything together. Okay, so once you get the bodice set, pretty good to go. And then we get into that skirt. Basically lots of layers, and we sew one to the bodice, and then we gather another one, sew it to the next level, gather the next level, sew it together. It's just going to be a lot of gathering and sewing. But then we'll have our gathered-y skirt, we'll have our peasant neckline to our shirt, and yeah, we'll go from there. I may end up adding a little bit of elastic to the waistband. It's not really a waistband, it's just where the bodice, where the bodice of the dress gets sewn to the skirt. It's a little wide on this dress when I made it before, so I may end up adding some elastic there just to cinch it in a little bit, but we'll see. All right, let's come back and we'll start with doing the bodice. Oh, but hang on. We got to cut out all the pieces. Okay, well, I'm going to do that, and I'll see you guys a little later. Bye. Oh my word, you guys. That took forever. But we have so much gingham now. So many colors. Doesn't even all fit on my cutting board. Oh my goodness gracious. But you can tell, hey, this pyramid of gingham is the skirt, and these pieces are doubled, like the orange is doubled, the yellow is doubled, and then the green is actually 3 pieces kind of folded to approximately how they would be as the skirt. And then of course the bottom blue tier here is 4 panels, kind of just laid them out so you can see. Again, might have to adjust the length on that bottom one, and of course these are going to be ruffled or gathered before they're sewn together, but there's the skirt. Okay, but you can also see, hey, we've got the bodice coming in over here. Wow, front and back of the bodice, and then of course our 2 sleeves. Wow. All right, guys, well, let's double check our pattern again and see what we got to do to get sewing. Okay, here we are, guys. Let's begin at the beginning. Gotta sew up the side seams of the bodice, sew up the side seams of those sleeves, and of course we could finish the sleeve cuffs at that time as well. I might save that closer to the end. Then, yeah, we gotta get the sleeves attached to the bodice and have that elastic in that neckline. So then the bodice will be basically good to go, and we can turn our attention over to that skirt. And it is a pretty straightforward process, but we're gonna have to sew the side seams of the skirt panels so you have one long piece, add some gathering stitches so you can gather that, scrunch that fabric in, and of course if it's the top tier, we'll sew it to the bodice. And then as we just keep going, kind of do the same thing. Sew the side seams to the skirt tier, gather it up, sew it to the next level, and just keep on going. And yeah, then we'll have not just 3. By the time we're done, we're gonna have 4 layers. Oi.
when I've made this pattern before, I've found that, yeah, process is pretty straightforward. It makes sense. It works, but it does take time, especially when we're dealing with so much fabric, lots of gathering, and just lots of fabric to deal with. So I'm going to get as far as I can this evening, and I'll show you guys along the way where I'm at. Let's dive in. Well, we've got something that looks kind of like the top of a dress. Hey, but we have this really giant neckline. We don't quite have shoulders yet. So one way that we're going to create that is by creating a tube for elastic, and that tube will go all around that neckline, and the elastic will go into the tube and shrink up that neckline. Let's take a look at that. All right. Now, if you follow the pattern directions, they will tell you to first fold under a tiny little bit of the fabric and then fold that under one more time, making a really thin tube to insert your really skinny elastic. That's a great way to do it. One way that I change things up a little bit is I like to create that tube using, where is it? Bias tape. Now that does lower the waistline just a little bit. And it makes a kind of a thicker neckline. So if you really want something that's super lightweight and really comfortable against your skin, you might do this rolled item. I don't mind the bias tape though around the neck, and I actually prefer putting this on to making this tiny little channel with lots of ironing and a certain amount of measuring, which kind of drives me crazy. So I have a little bit of bias tape, and I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do with it. Let's check that out. Okay, we've got our garment turned the right side out, and I'm just going to kind of show you how I'm going to do this bias tape. If you've never done bias tape before, definitely just check out a tutorial on how to put single fold bias tape on a garment, because it's kind of a fun process, and I just really like the way it finishes seams, and it just works. Less fiddly, you're not measuring and ironing a ton of stuff, so I like it. So if I was going to put this bias tape all around my neck, I could use pins just like that, or I really love these like little bias tape clips because they're super easy peasy. And you go all around the outside. This is the right side, remember, outside the right side of your garment, and go all the way around the neckline. But hey, let me kind of just pretend that I've sewn this on. I'm going to use some pins just right in this little folded like ditch right here, and they call it stitch in the ditch. Let me put a few little pins just horizontally in that ditch to pretend as if I'd sewn it on. Okay, so these pins are no longer pins. They are stitching. And let me just kind of get some of these guys out of the way really quick. So let's say that I had stitched in this ditch, stitched the bias tape on the front. Then I've got a second step. I'm going to turn this whole thing to the inside. And I can put some little clips on that. Pin it in place. And so then the bias tape isn't going to show from the front, but you'll see it from the back. And then, you know, from the inside here, I'll just stitch kind of close to the bottom of the bias tape, and it'll leave a tube. In between, I could put elastic in there, and it makes a super nice finished neck bias tape shouldn't really show once it's all stitched on. So, I'll have a finished neckline. I will have a tube for my elastic. I don't have to do lots of ironing. I'm excited. So I'm going to be getting out my big piece here of bias tape and get started on this. Well, you can see, guys, we got that neckline on the dress. You could tell a little earlier there, I had left a little gap in the stitching. Right about here on that bias tape so that I could insert the elastic. Never forget to leave a gap. I almost forgot. Don't you forget. Then I inserted the elastic and I tried the top on just to play with it, and then adjusted the elastic accordingly. Then I just sewed the ends of the elastic together, hid them back underneath that seam binding, and secured that down again. So, hey, we've got a neckline. Now we got to talk skirt. Whew! Alright, so I have sewn all of the skirt panels together. Here's my top tier, my top panel. It is now like a giant donut of fabric. It's stitched down on both edges. Hey, by the way, I'm also finishing the raw edges with zigzag stitching as I go, both on the skirt and the top, just to try to keep some of this gingham from fraying so much. If you have a serger, of course, that would be ideal, but I'm just using a zigzag stitch. Now, looking at our top tier, I've also stitched 2 rows of super giant straight stitches around the top, and I'm gonna take, let's see, gotta make sure you guys can see this. I've got my 2 rows of stitching. I'm gonna take one of my loose thread ends here. I haven't back stitched or anything. Take one of those loose ends and do a little pull in. Hey, that's gonna help me gather this big piece to match the bottom of my bodice. We may have to switch to time lapse. I'm gonna have to do some gathering, and then I gotta pin this top tier of the skirt into the top. inside out, and I've got my skirt right side out. I'm gonna stick this right in. I want my right sides together. And then I'm gonna pin those side seams. Make sure I actually do have right sides together. Yes, okay. Woo! That one's an easy one to mess up. Okay, let's pin it in. Here we go. Hey you guys, it's the next day, and you can tell last night I got the skirt. Tier number 1 stitched on there. You guys saw me when I was pinning it, pinning it along this edge, and then once it's pulled back out, there you go. Hello, first tier of the skirt. Okay, so then I also did some really big gathering stitches on the other layers of the skirt, so that means that my next step is I gotta gather the yellow layer and sew it to the orange layer. And then once that's done, I gotta gather the green layer and stitch that to the yellow one. And then, whoa, I have to gather the blue layer and stitch that on. So, pretty straightforward process. I know what I need to do. It's gonna take a little while. A lot of gathering, a lot of sewing, but look at this color combination. Just seeing this pile of rainbow gingham. It reassures me this is all going to be worth it in the end. Here we go. Oh my goodness, you guys. Yeah, all that ruffling. It took forever. But you know, it was not an unpleasant process. I just took my time, got some iced tea, and watched a whole bunch of some of my favorite sewing and historical sewing and costuming YouTubers. I really love doing that when I'm doing like hand sewing or doing a lot of gathering and pinning, like for this dress. Turn on some of those awesome sewing videos, and they kind of, they teach you stuff while you're working, but they also keep you kind of inspired to keep going on your project. Anyway, so much fun. Hey, but there's still a few things we still need to do on this dress. Namely, I do need to hem it, and that will take quite a while. I also need to finish these sleeves, and I think I'm going to add a little bit to maybe this waistline. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, sleeves. Well, I think I'm just going to follow the pattern directions and just roll over a tiny little hem and then roll over a thicker one, making a tube all around the sleeve so that I can insert elastic inside in much the same way as I did with this neckline, just not using the bias tape, making the tube out of the fabric itself. be sure to leave a little gap so you can put your elastic in there. And then with this waist, okay, so this is kind of a boxy waist. I think I might want to add just a little bit of a cinch to help kind of taper in some of this voluminous gingham just a little bit. So you know what? I think I'm going to use my bias tape trick that I used when I was sewing my prairie dress. I'm going to do something kind of similar to what I did with this neckline. Okay, I'm going to take my single fold bias tape, and I have some pins here, pinning it to the seam allowance, going all the way around here between the bodice and the skirt. I have some pins just going in the ditch to pretend as if they're stitching, because they can kind of show you what this would be like. I lined up the ditch of the seam binding with the seam that attaches the skirt to the bodice, just as much as I could. And so I kind of line that up. I would pin all the way around and then pretend these pins are stitches. So they're showing you, hey, we would have the seam binding attached to that seam allowance. It's not attached or stitched onto the bodice yet, but if I folded it over once it was stitched and then stitched at the top of the seam binding, that time it would then be stitching here into the bodice a little bit. But then I would get another handy dandy tube that if I leave a gap, I can insert more elastic just like I did in the waist, or sorry, in the neckline, and that can help me scrunch this fabric in a little bit. Now, I know there are other ways to do this, but I have tried this before and I like the way it worked. You could check it out also in my prairie dress sewing video where I used the same pattern, did the same technique. I just did a different skirt design and changed a few other things. So check out that video. It's a fun one and just another example of how I'm doing this. But I think I'm gonna get started on this. I still need to do the sleeves and of course the hemming. And while I do that, hey, it's a great time for you guys to hit that like button if you found this video amusing and want to let me know. And of course, subscribe for more videos coming up, all sorts of artsy, fun, summery, spring stuff heading your way from Partners in Craft. Thanks for sharing the love, you guys. It really makes a difference to my channel and to me. So I'll get busy sewing and I will show you guys what this looks like when it's done.